Is there anything better than on a chilly day? Let me kind of fix this a bit. When you've got a nice warm cup of coffee, and then you put your not your arms, your hands around it, and it's just like, I think it warms the soul. But anyways, Q&A this week. Only got 4 questions this week. I think that you guys need to step your game up with asking me questions. But I appreciate you guys asking me questions and checking out the channel. All right, let's get into it. Should you increase your maintenance volume throughout a mesocycle by a couple of sets? What about reps in reserve? So I believe this is within the context of someone's like, hey, I want to try to maintain my muscle mass. Does my maintenance volume still increase throughout a mesocycle? Should I still increase my volume by a couple of sets throughout a meso, or what should I do with my reps in reserve when I'm just training for maintenance? And I think that, man, I have a hard time seeing, like, if someone, say your maintenance volume on average for a muscle is like 6 to 8 sets, I have a hard time seeing someone actually losing muscle if they did like 6 sets across the entire meso rather than working from 6 to 8 sets. So I would lean towards just keeping volume the same around kind of where you think maintenance is. And like, we can probably maintain muscle at maintenance calories, eating enough protein without training at all for like 2 or 3 weeks. So if you're doing like 5 or 6 sets across an entire meso, like, I think you're going to be fine regardless of whether you increase your set here or there. Would it theoretically make sense to increase a set or 2? Maybe it's not the worst idea. And maybe if you just want to play things safe, not a big deal. All right, but I don't think you have to. And I generally keep sets the same across the mesocycle when training at maintenance. But I'm also probably on the conservative end of making sure I'm doing plenty of volume to maintain. All right. Now, with reps in reserve, I would probably just treat it like any other mesocycle. And I would take things from like 3-ish RIR down to 0 RIR. So this way, even if your maintenance, the stimulus to maintain muscle theoretically increases across the mesocycle, you're still reaching that increased stimulus with reps in reserve. All right. And I would probably rather meet that stimulus via reps in reserve. Is it via or via? I have no idea. Via, I don't know. Reps in reserve rather than volume, for the reason that you might get a better resensitization effect to volume if you just train closer to failure rather than keeping reps in reserve the same and increasing a couple of sets, if that makes sense. So that's how I would approach that. Next question says, Valentine Tamposi, really good bodybuilder. Love listening to what this guy has to say about bodybuilding, and really smart dude, so make sure to check him out if you haven't. But he says, direct abs is a waste of time. What do I think about that? Ryan, don't you say that you train your abs? Well, I do. So if I train my abs, then I probably don't think it's a waste of time. And I don't. And this comes from my personal experience to where when I was in high school, I would train my abs off. I was going to say, how was I trying to put this? I would train my ass off. Do you guys get what I'm trying to say? I would train my abs a shit ton, is what I'll say. And when I would get lean my abs would look good. I would have solid definition there and that sort of thing. And then I started hearing people suggest that, hey, ab training might not be doing much, and you might not need to train them a whole lot. And I kind of went away from training them for a year or two. And then when I cut down again, I still was pretty dang lean. I still had definition in my arms and stuff like that, and I was at a similar body weight, but my abs just didn't quite look as good. Now, when I went off to college, I also think that for the first year, I probably took a step back to where, I was intermittent fasting. I was probably doing things. I was just making not smart decisions regarding training. I was doing super low volumes and stuff like that. So that absolutely could play a role. But my experience is that when I went away from ab training, they just didn't seem to pop as much when I would get leaner. And I think that for every single muscle group, if you want to hypertrophy that muscle group and you want to maximize growth in that muscle group, then I think it's a good idea to train it directly. And I think that this might be something that Valentine might be getting at. I mean, I don't want to speak for him, but he might be coming at it from a perspective that, hey, having a little bit extra of that ab thickness might not actually be important for a bodybuilder or a physique athlete. And it might not be that relevant to the sport of bodybuilding. I'm not sure if that's what he's getting at, but that could be one reason why maybe he doesn't always recommend that. And I would say that some people, their genetics for their abs are just going to be to the point to where they don't have to train their abs and they're going to look fine. And then other people are probably going to need some direct work. And I do think that you can get them to pop a little bit more because, I mean, your abs at the end of the day are a muscle group. And I think that directed stimulus towards that muscle group, if you can grow that muscle, then that's probably a good idea. And if you grow your abs a little bit, you can probably get them to pop a little bit more when you're lean. Is kind of where I stand on that. All right. So I think that some people absolutely don't probably need to train them. Some people, maybe they're already happy with how their abs look when they're lean, or for the sport of bodybuilding, maybe it's not quite as important. But I think that if someone wants to maximize their chances that their abs are going to look well defined and that their abs are going to pop when they're lean, some direct stimulus for the abs is probably a good idea. All right. Next question. Thoughts on getting more out of less volume as you get more trained. So some people immediately jump to the conclusion that as you get more trained, you're going to have to do more volume to still see results, because the principle of progressive overload, as you get more and more trained, you might have to do more and more to get the kind of same training effect. And I actually think that the more trained someone gets, the better they are at stimulating a muscle on a per set basis. So while they might need more overall stress, the more trained they are, they're better at stressing a muscle per set. So regarding your total volume levels, they might not actually move that much across a training career. Especially when you're going from like intermediate to late intermediate to more advanced, it might not change that much. Like, granted, a complete beginner is going to grow from running on the treadmill, so that's going to have to scale a bit. But in that sense, yeah, I think that some people just get more out of less training the more trained they get, and often people get more out of less volume and their volumes actually go down across the training career, which is kind of counterintuitive. And there's also something to be said for the stronger you get, you might actually be stimulating a muscle a little bit more on a per set basis, because each set might be a little bit more absolutely overloading because you're capable of lifting more weight each set. So that's likely also playing a role there. So I think that it's been my experience that, if anything, sometimes when I have a late beginner, earlier intermediate, once we get their execution on point, their volume actually goes down for a while. And then it often kind of gets to a point to where we get in a groove of a nice volume range for them, and it doesn't seem to change a whole lot. So I wouldn't just say that across the training career, your volumes have to go up across all scenarios. And I think that often people notice they get more out of less sets. They have a better mind-muscle connection. They're better at stimulating muscle on a per set basis, and maybe they're stronger. So each set's a little bit more overloading. All right, so that's kind of what I think about that. Final question. Do you prefer more frequent mini cuts or longer cuts? So kind of the idea. Would I prefer to kind of do a 3 or 4 month massing phase and a 4-week mini cut? Or would I prefer a 8 or 9 month massing phase and maybe more of a standard cut, like 7 or 8 weeks? And I think that both can absolutely work. But I like the longer phases. And I just think that there's something to be said for long gaining phases that are slow and steady to where you can gain a lot of momentum. And one big benefit to having a long, slow and steady gaining phase is that it can really allow you to kind of get used to your kind of off-season physique. For me personally, it just seems as though when I start gaining, I almost immediately look just a little bit softer, a little bit less crisp, a little bit chunkier cheeks. I already feel like they're coming in. But these longer gaining phases allow you to get used to that a little bit. And it kind of allows you to detach from the scale a little bit. And it allows you to focus on other things in your life. And I feel like that if you're constantly entering a mini cut every 3 or 4 weeks, then you're always tempted to go back to that lean state. And I don't know about you, but sometimes when I've mini cutted in the past, I always want to turn it into a longer cut and start seeing more and more definition and that sort of thing. And I think that can result in some wheel spin. And, sometimes a 3 or 4 month mass just really isn't long enough to see like substantial muscle growth to where you cut back down and you really see those gains. So I kind of tend to result for that. It's not proper English. I tend to look for longer gaining phases to really stay in that surplus, slow and steady. That's probably more so the kind of 3DMJ approach opposed to maybe the Renaissance periodization approach, if you had to put them both to have set approaches, which is kind of ridiculous to do. But man, if I could get to a point to where at minimum people are having like 7 or 8 month-long gaining phases, month-long, not necessarily mesocycle long, that can put them in a really, really good spot. And then, hey, during a cutting phase, sometimes I think that, hey, might as well just stay in that cutting phase for an extra few weeks and make it more of a standard cut, really get in there, get some stuff done, and then you're good again for another several months is how I like to approach that, all right? So appreciate the questions. Drop them below. Share this on your story on Instagram and tag me in it. If you benefited from this, I would really appreciate that. All right, see ya.